Hello. Alright. What we couldn't put on for you guys was the stories of the Hmong legend about the relationships between the Hmong and the Chinese. I can't remember the second one correctly, but the first one. The story goes, the Hmong believe that the Chinese and the Hmong are brothers. The Hmong was the older and stronger brother of the two, and so they were separated when their parents died, and they never kept any trace of each other. And so what happened after that was they would visit the graves of their parents annually, once a year, but they never visited at the same time, so they never knew of each other. And so then, let's see, and then one day, the Hmong brother noticed that someone else had been worshiping at the grave of his parents. And so what he did was he checked up on the graves regularly to see who it was. And so then the Chinese brother came by, and he pulled the Chinese brother and he said, "What are you doing here?" And so the Chinese brother questioned him the same question. And from there, they realized that they were brothers. But after that, they departed and never kept in touch again. And so that's one of the legends that the Hmong have of the relationship between the Hmong and the Chinese. And that's it. I apologize for the bad recording. First off, does anyone have any questions about the slideshow presentation of the Hmong in China?
Yeah, that was about the content. So yeah.
Well, I'll give one of my opinions. While I was reading and doing research about the history of the Hmong within the dynasties, I thought it was really interesting that the Hmong always persevered, and they never gave up their identity, and they never assimilated with the Chinese people. How do you guys feel about that? Like, knowing that we kept going forward and we moved away from our kingdom, what could have been, but we didn't want to give up our identity.
I guess just as a personal reflection of that, I was thinking about like how much of a reflection of that is, here today, about how we're doing and how we're actually resisting assimilation, and how at the same time, while we're trying to put out our culture, generations are coming along the way, they're actually assimilating, or not actually assimilating, but actually integrating into the culture more so than the older people. And I just think that was an interesting occurrence because, I've bet like those of you who aren't Hmong, you guys are always hearing about how your parents are coming to speak Hmong or learn how to do this Hmong traditions or learn about the Hmong funeral or Hmong wedding and stuff. But I'm not sure how true it is for your family, for my family, we do that or not. So I'm not sure if we're actually going to be able to resist assimilation because of the whole idea of like globalization and just the overall increasing mobility that all of us have. We're constantly moving, we're constantly seeing other cultures, we're being able to travel to different countries whenever we want. So it's just really interesting occurrence.
Any opinions out there?
Okay. So I think something that's really interesting to point out too is that if you look at the history, it's over 2,000 years, over 1,000 years for the most part, that the Hmong people started traveling and moving out of China and getting forced and pushed out of China. And yet, if you look at what we call tradition and what our cultural customs are, is that there's more of an interest that to look into Hmong history today than there were 50 years ago, or during the 70s and 80s when the Hmong people just arrived in the United States from Laos and Thailand and from Southeast Asia. And what a lot of new scholars are saying is that the way that we play some of our most sacred Hmong instruments, like the pang and the drums, those, how we play them and the songs that we incorporate into our rituals, such as marriage, weddings, and funerals, it can be traced back to the Hmong people that are still living in China, which is basically where all the prime customs are, and where it is home, and where they've been living despite the reshaping of China, despite China's own revolutions within itself. And so that's kind of the consistency of the Hmong culture and how it also integrates and adapts things from its surroundings. For example, what we in the United States call the Hmong identity, if you look at that, most of us are relating it more towards Laos and Thailand or Vietnam, and that's the Southeast Asian region. And if we look at our culture, the things that we do, for example, food in particular, a lot of the things that we call home food, it's actually Vietnamese food, or it's actually Chinese food, or it's actually original dishes that were adopted or incorporated from Laotian cultures, Thai cultures. And so it's really remarkable to look at the consistency and consistency of certain things and elements that the Hmong people still keeps. The language obviously has changed. Today we incorporate a lot of English words, mostly because we don't have it in our own dictionary, or because it's things that we're using more and more these days, like the internet. What's the internet 100 years ago, So kind of things like that, where language is slowly kind of changing, but there are some things, again, too, there's some words that we say today, like how we say mother, Nia. In the dialect of the Mong-mong in China, they use that word too, call their mother Nia. So there are things that you can find that can relate to that.
I think something that we still keep to is our identity with our tribes, like Hongda, Hongzhuo. I know that gets asked a lot, even if within the youth, it's like when you meet someone, you're like, oh, like, are you, what Hmong are you? Are you green? Is your dialect green, or is it white? So.
I'm just curious for the Hmong students out here. Where do you see the Hmong people in terms of like keeping their culture in like 50 years? Do you think that we're still gonna hold it on to it as strong as we have it today, or where do you see it going?
I feel like it's not going to be a strong hold, just the fact that like everybody's trying to make it in life. But it's like some of the customs that show because like they use and stuff, it's just become kind of almost a hassle to do. I don't know, maybe it's because like our generation are getting lazy or something. But I mean that's just my answer.
Personal experiences with struggles of trying to keep culture? Well, I don't know. I guess it really depends on where you live. Right? I mean, like living in like a fast-paced society like in America, we have a lot of responsibilities that takes us away from family responsibilities. Whereas like cultures within like China, Laos, or Thailand, we may have more time to do things with family, and maybe through that we preserve our cultures. But here in the U.S., I'm not so sure anymore because, I guess you can say I'm a child of like the 90s. I was born in 1981, and just growing up through the 80s and the 90s, I started realizing that our culture is just going away, like within like every new generation. And so, with like going on the early 90s, I still felt that we had a really strong grasp on it. But just nowadays, most Hmong kids, they can't really speak Hmong. So maybe in the U.S. it's changing, but I'm not sure what the person, other parts of the world. So that's just my personal opinion.
Well, in my opinion, I really admire those who are in like Thailand and Laos right now because they probably do know more tradition than the Hmong kids in the U.S. also, like, I do agree with you in saying that the Hmong culture is, or, the tradition is, like, decreasing right now because most of the Hmong students are speaking Monglish, which mixing Hmong and English together. But yeah, but like, one of my personal goals is, like, or what I want to do is try to improve the Hmong tradition again. Because I don't want us as a minority group to die down even more. So
Yeah, just thinking about your comment, another question just came to mind, I guess I'm wondering, do you think it's important to keep culture or keep our, I guess, we have history, we do, but it's important, but I guess, is it important to continue trying to preserve these things that are seen and inevitable and then go away? How important is it?
Like, I grew up in a pretty Americanized home, but I feel like it's very important to keep it, because it's like, no matter how Americanized you are, it's like at the end of the day, you're still home. So, it's kind of like, it's going back to your roots, And it's like you're Caucasians, they're not just white, they're like Polish and stuff, or Irish, and like they get that. Or if you're black, you're not just black, you're like African or like Jamaican. It's kind of like that. And I feel like with both, like, we actually have a really strong grasp on like our culture and stuff, like just in general. And so I think it's very important.
Like, I do like a lot of writing stuff too, but then like coming from my perspective is that, like one big question for everybody, Western society included, is that what is traditions? And the way that I've observed it is that tradition is kind of a preservation of what we know today and what we are doing now. For example, in the Hmong culture in particular, because I'm kind of a part of that, I've been learning it, I've been doing it like all my life, so I guess I'm kind of an expert on it. Not on that level where I know everything, but then I live it daily, So what is tradition? And what I've seen is that tradition is mostly just what our parents told us and what their parents told them, and then it's just a system of that, passing on to the next generation what you know today, what you are doing today. Same thing with Western culture, and then a big kind of an issue, but not so much an issue, is that globalization. There's just positives about it, there's negatives about it. Everybody's mixing and interacting together. Everybody's learning about everybody's culture. People are taking bits and pieces from here and there. I may like something from your culture, so I adapt it into my culture and practice it. You may like something from my culture and you put something and you practice it too. And then it's become more like a melting pot, So take it as it is, or take it with a grain of salt. Is that it's getting to the point where we are becoming really equal, despite what ethnicity or what cultural customs we have. Everybody's basically doing the same thing. As, for example, as we observe in American society, we pretty much celebrate the same holidays for whatever reason. You may not practice the same, religion, but you're celebrating the same holidays, and you're doing kind of like that, And food in particular, that's kind of the big thing that we can all relate to, right? Is that everything's kind of blending in where it's kind of the same dish. So it's, instead of a salad bowl, what you have is a melting pot of cheese, right? Or fondue, where everything just tastes the same. So it's kind of changing to that. And then, like I said, tradition, what is it? Everybody's fighting against it because of the globalization, because everybody wants to preserve what they currently know, what they can pass on. And things obviously change too based on society, because there are things that maybe our grandparents did that we didn't like, so we changed that, and that's kind of how it's changing and how it's getting carried on.
So how many of you have been asked, what are you? And you're like, I'm American, because I was born in the United States. And they'll be like, no, what are you? Right? And you're like, I'm Hmong. And they're like, okay, what's Hmong? Is that Mongolian? Right? I've gotten that throughout my childhood. And you're like, no, it's not Mongolian. No, okay, well, what's Hmong then? And you're like, well, we're kind of like people that lived in China, but then we also live in Laos, and we also live in Thailand and Vietnam, and then we also live in the United States. So it's kind of like, I don't know, when I was a child, it was kind of annoying, because I was just kind of like, well, I don't know. You know, I'm American, I was born in America, I'm Hmong, you know, that's what my parents tell me. But as you get older, you do wonder, like, where are we from? Who are we? We never stayed in a place stably. We don't have a country. So where did we start from? What do we tell these people that ask us if we're Mongolian? Has that ever come across your mind? Have you ever just sat there and thought, okay, so what can I tell this person so that they can kind of understand, oh, so that's where you're from? Because we're not just from one place. We've been all over the place. And that's why we kind of wanted to do this history, just so that we can try to get back as far as we can. It's still very blurry, but I mean, just think about it. Where are you from? Yes.
Does the term nomad come into play?
We get that a lot too. No, that's kind of like when they tie it in with the Mongolians. But there are I mean, they have considered us nomads as well, right, in some
Yeah.
researches. So, yeah, but we're not. But I mean,
The thing about the term nomad, it doesn't identify a type of people. It identifies a migratory process, right? It's not sort of your Hmong. It's not, you know, it's not Caucasian. It has a broader definition.
With the Hmong society itself, they're not really nomadic. Kind of how the Mongolians are known to be nomadic because they really don't stay in one spot. They tend to move around and move camps, similarly to the Native Americans, how they kind of do move around too. Just except for the Native Americans, they kind of stay a little bit more in the same region. But the Hmong who actually aren't the society actually aren't nomadic because we were more slash and burn actually. The reason why we have a history of moving around was because we just kept getting pushed out too. And to kind of relate that to the Native Americans. And so we're actually not nomadic, but we have a history of moving around. So it gets used like that too.
And I think that's a good question because there are a lot of reasons why we move around. For instance, it's mostly due to war and just conflict. But I wonder if there are any other reasons why we move around. And it's just one out of many questions that we're confronted with that we can't answer. So and hopefully maybe in the future we'll find something interesting through like the Chinese archives or who knows, maybe like the Vietnamese or the Laotian archives in the future and reveal some more stuff about us.
I think one of the supporting facts about it too, though, is that Hmong are well known for their farming and agricultural skills. But before, they were tilting lands and rotating, what is it, crops or different types of vegetations to, every year. Because obviously, if you farm, you know that if you keep farming the same thing, you're the same type of crops, and you're gonna eat up all the minerals, and then all you have left is just dead dirt, right? So these advanced methods of agriculture, it's part of the Hmong culture too. So that's kind of one of the reasons how we know that they are nomadic, because they do have like all these advanced skills in agriculture first, before it was even known to the Western world that you're supposed to change the crops every single year to not eat up all the minerals in the dirt.
I don't think there's ever, I don't think there's like a reason on like where the Hmong started from or like an origin on them. There's like, all all humans or whatever originated from Africa, right? And then like everything after that is kind of just guessing because like all these scientists are trying to like, go into like all these fossils, like skeletons and stuff. And it's like if you think about it, everybody's just from Africa. So is it really all that important to find the origin or?
I think that answers the question because currently that's what they're saying, but who knows what they're going to say 50 or 100 years from now. And as our technology, people as well sure we're gonna find out and learn many more interesting things about people in general, just the origins. There's so much that we don't know. I mean, apparently we may believe that our level of technology is advanced, but I think it's still very perfect.
So do you believe saying I'm from Africa is a wrong answer?
No, not really, because we truly don't know. It's a point of view that can be defended.
Another thing to add to that too, I think it's a few years back that they found bones that were older in China. So, so it's just kind of like, yeah, what our technology allows us right now to find out is very limited. But I would not say conclude with that. I would say definitely challenge it, definitely question it, because something new is popping up every day.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of fun to try to trace back where you really came from. I mean, it's kind of fun. I mean, that's the question for all human beings, like where did we come from? We don't know. And I guess that's kind of like where we are right now, because we don't have like a motherland where we came from. We can't be like we're Chinese, we're from China. So it's just the idea of kind of figuring out like if we ever had a land or if we ever had a certain place where we actually started from.
I think one thing too is that it's just a fascination of people, and the more you know, right? I think people are just interested in knowing and tracking the progress of how we got here. So, for example, Americans, what is Americans? Aren't the Native Americans the real Americans? But everybody in the United States today, we're considered Americans. But people are just interested in seeing, like, oh, these Americans, the reason they're American was because they kind of came from, Europe, or they came from Germany or whatever, or Laos or Thailand for that matter. And so I think we're just interested in that. But something that you guys that I kind of want to get you guys to do more research is that in the presentation earlier, it was and Peng described the myth about how the Hmong and Chinese were brothers. Well, if you want to look more into that, there's theories about the relations that the Hmongs and Koreans would be brothers still were if they originated from the same group of people, from the same individual. And then there's a myth about how Laos and Thailand are actually branched off of brothers who came from the land of China. Like they probably weren't Chinese, and that was before China was even China of what we know today. But there's a myth that says that they were brothers. And if you look at their transcripts or their cultural practices and customs, and even like their traditional wares, they're really similar, and they speak basically the same language, kind of how we say white Hmong and green Hmong, So you guys might want to do more research. That's kind of something like a research topic. That's a hypothesis right now that really needs a lot more research done in and a lot more explanation and expansion.
Yeah, there's like a lot of, actually there's a few theories that are revolving around that idea that, like for example, there's this one theory that they're going to allow all those groups, different groups within East Asia are actually a group of a big family that's just basically went their own ways. It's really interesting, and SE says, well, if you're really interested in this kind of stuff, you should really research into that. I'm pretty sure China probably has like a lot of good stuff in the archives, so let's just not get a chance to it. So I don't think any of us can get access to it. So, but it'll be interesting. Maybe one day they'll open up. So, right. But I think that's it, and we can go for our break, and it's gonna be for 15 minutes, and we'll see you all back here in 15 minutes, and we'll continue off with our next part, which is our journey to Indochina. So thank you.
See y'all back at 3:15.
3:15.